Morning, everyone. All right. Hope you're all doing well. We'll, as usual, spend a little bit more to ensure that everybody is able to get into the Zoom call. But I hope that you are excited and looking forward to our Just Wind for All Regional Wind Labs in Action webinar. We're really trying to talk about how we are powering just and effective wind energy. Just Wind for All is a Horizon Europe research and innovation project. And as you can see from our map, we have many project partners that are wind labs, and we're very excited to share this information. We started this project back in 2022, and lots has changed, but also things have remained. So if we can, I will at least go through the housekeeping rules for today. So everybody, of course, stay muted during presentations. This has been 5 years in Zoom, so I don't think this is surprising. But also, if you can, cameras on is always encouraged if you're comfortable. This being said, we will be recording, so if that's something you're not comfortable with, you can keep your cameras off. You can post your questions to the chat at any time, and we will answer them in the order that they're received, but also in the designated Q&A, you're also very empowered to raise your hand and ask live as well. Indeed. Any other questions in this regard, please let us know in the chat. In the meantime, if you can rename yourself, if you're not already there, with your name and organization, that's also super helpful for us to kind of better understand where you're coming from. Great. So if there's no other questions, we will get into the presentation to share the agenda items. So as you can tell, we are in the introduction section, and we will just quickly get to know each other in here, as well as kind of get to know the Just Wind for All project. Then we will have each of our 5 wind labs share their insights within the last over 3 years of our project. And we'll talk about our challenges, feedback, and actionable strategies. These will be in Bulgaria, Portugal, Germany, the North Sea Basin, and Compass for the larger European scale. Then we are very honored to have interventions by ICLEI and Eco-Union. And then in this time, we'll also, of course, have our Q&A discussion round so that we're able to bridge our wind lab insights with local action. Indeed. Okay, as you can tell, it's pretty action-packed, and we got to make sure we're on time. But in the meantime, we do want to know a little bit more about our audience. So in a second, a Zoom poll will pop up, and we just kind of want to know who is in the room first of all. So the stakeholder group that you consider yourself, as well as the what aspects of wind energy governance interest you most from your perspective. Then, if you have any quick thoughts, short answers, words with what does just wind energy development mean to you, and what does effective wind energy development mean to you? We use these words in our project, and we really prioritize them. So we are looking forward to your thoughts and see if we can have more discussion on that later. Great, it looks like we have some some answers rolling in. That's great. But everybody, I'll give another 20 seconds for the main ones. All right, we're getting some good answers in the short answer section. Great, great, great. Give another 10 seconds and then we can keep on moving. All right, last call. Alrighty. And we're gonna share it. So if you have it, quickly submit it. Perfect. So our responses. So who is in the room? As we were hoping, we have a good array. We have a good mix between NGOs, energy communities, the wind industry, research and academia, as well as local public authorities and regional public authorities, which is great. No community members yet, but hopefully they show up in the next moments, which is excellent. And then, of the aspects of wind energy governance that interest you most, by far, it's policy, but it's good to see that environment and social are very high up there. Technology is important, but we all know that that techno-economic has been the way, so it's very fair. I can't show my short answers, but here we go. But it looks like, okay, this is new to me. All right, so it did make a word cloud after all, which is great. So just wind energy development is energy, community, inclusiveness, ecology, many good words, and yeah, great. And then for effective, we have nature, increasing, making sure that our timeframes are effective and pragmatic. Great, thank you so much. We'll continue with the webinar. I know that I'm already a little off off my time, so thanks again. Just to give a little context of our project, but it sounds like we're all on the same kind of wavelength here. Of course, we know that Europe needs more wind power to achieve our climate and energy targets of a clean and affordable and secure Europe. So we know this needs to be accelerated. We know that wind energy in particular needs to more than double by 2030. We know that this transformation will impact our environment, economy, society, has major impacts and implications for our land and sea. As of today, the national implementation has been slow with many, many obstacles, as we may already know. So of course, we need a fast, optimized, and just wind energy deployment that prioritizes a holistic approach. As we know, as you may know, the implementation of these targets is taking place at the regional and local level. How it happened. So recently in the Eurobarometer, says that almost 9 in 10 EU citizens think it's important that national governments in the EU take action. And this is important, but also it's going to show in the regional and local level. Whoops. These original articles are from when our project first started, but as you can see, not that much has changed. There's still a lot of public acceptance issues within the realm of wind energy, and we don't see any slowing down of that. And it's because of this, it's very important for all of us to have this just and effective realm where we're saying, how are these projects going to look and affect me? Where will they be? What are the effects and who benefits? So this is kind of the beginning of our the main objective of our project. We're focused on accelerating on and offshore wind deployment by utilizing existing structures and processes to make citizen participation more just and effective. Our project identified 4 challenges in the process. So from the perspective of a gap in knowledge and data availability, a need for more coherent policy frameworks between governance levels. So again, from the EU all the way down to the local level. Tapping the need for tapping novel resources, such as technologies, but also cross-regional and good practice exchange. And finally, as you can imagine, justice. So ensuring that social disputes against wind energy often reveal these injustices. Okay, within the project, we did look further into energy justice as a paradigm that includes not only the procedural and distributional justice, which is who is in the process of decision making and who benefits and how do you benefit, but also restorative justice and recognitional justice. These are major pillars within our JustWind4All project. This shows that we do take that into everything that our project does, including a multi and transdisciplinary approach to all of this. We interview many different diverse stakeholders within the project, and we have our Wind Forum Fellows, which also ensure that our work that we're doing is practical and in that way effective. What our discussion today is going to focus the most on is these wind labs, which are our living labs. Here you can see the bigger picture. So we have, as I mentioned in the beginning, 4 European regions and 1 cross-level compass. And the idea here is that we are testing and exchanging knowledge to connect the important actors and researchers to these governance challenges and solutions. Alrighty, I think this is my last one, so thank you for bearing with me here. So of our regional wind labs, we are very close or have already created our energy reads. How did this happen? Each of our wind labs had at least 5 co-production activities where we engaged diverse stakeholders in dialogue and co-creation. We drew from lessons learned to formulate these practical guidelines, instruments, and strategies that we're going to share today. All of this feeds into the wind energy read to give the insights and that are developed for recommendations on how to actually enable just and effective wind deployment. Of course, our main objective is to share real-world approaches and practices with other communities and regions across Europe, which is the beginning of, today is the beginning of this. So thank you for joining us. One final look into what you guys are thinking. If you're able to, you can use the QR code on the side of the screen to join a Slido poll. If not, we also can put the chat in the chat the URL to join. So the idea is, what is the biggest challenge from your perspective related to just and effective wind energy development in your region? Before we get into our regional wind labs, we're curious what your perspective is. All right, so we have financing, money, even though we didn't say economics is the most important. It's certainly a barrier. It's a challenge. Lack of political support, involvement, community benefits. Excellent. Support from government. I'm curious which government, but excellent. Lack of political support. Looks like we have harmonization of regulation. Perfect. Great, thanks so much. It looks like everybody's done with that poll. Then we have name one concrete benefit you would like to see from wind energy projects in your region or within your community. So in this, it could be for people, for nature, the local economy. Ideally, even if you have something that's for many of these, that's also great. I'll give a few more seconds. Great, so definitely we have environmental and social answers right off the bat, which is perfect. The need for affordable energy, and that goes into economic justice. Direct and indirect local jobs, also in the social world, a local fund for specific cultural activities, affordable energy, definitely. And then we also have our environmental reasons as well, which is ensuring that we have a benefit of nature restoration and that we are focusing on the birds and bats, since this is wind energy. Okay, great. Thanks so much for your responses. These are still active, so if you come up with anything in the meantime, feel free to add it. We always appreciate more input, so thank you again. But I do think that I have exhausted my time here, definitely. So I want to share with you our regional wind labs. We will start today in Bulgaria, and like I said, they'll share their challenges, feedback, and then their actionable strategies for just and effective wind energy. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to Maria.
Hello, everyone. Very nice to see so many people interested in our work. So I had the pleasure. My name is Maria Trifonova. I'm a senior research fellow at the Applied Research and Communication Fund located in Bulgaria, and I had the pleasure to coordinate the activities of Wind Lab 1, whose focus was on the offshore wind participation in the Bulgarian northeastern region. So before saying a few words about our findings, observations, and our approach and ambition, I would like to first give you a bit information about the contextual factors in which frame to great extent the launch of Wind Lab 1 in Bulgaria. So first, a few, maybe some more historical facts, but since 2008, the northeastern region in Bulgaria has emerged as the valley of the Bulgarian wind energy due to its geographical conditions. And currently, 80% of the installed capacity, or these are 560 megawatts, are installed there. And due to different historical specifics and maybe the timeline of Bulgarian accession to the European Union, several big projects are now also located in Natura protected areas in this region. Amanda, please click. However, although many new projects are under development right now, since 2014, only 3 or 4 single wind turbines entered the Bulgarian energy system. So we haven't seen a really a big project being but being commissioned. And not really clear reasons are publicly communicating about this fact, but my assumptions here are that there are a lot of environmental concerns and also grid bottlenecks in the regions. I would say the technical constraints are like less important in this case, but these impacted permitting. Although new projects are not being planned in nature sensitive places anymore. Then also some other thing is that some new hypes and hopes actually emerged with the publication of the EU offshore renewable energy strategy in 2020, which for first time mentions the Black Sea region or Black Sea basin's potential to attract offshore wind investments. Soon after, the World Bank, GRC, the Center for the Study of Democracy, among others, published assessments of the potential, seeing also the floating technology as most suitable due to conflicting usages of the areas and the depth also of the Black Sea. And this is the reason our focus was mainly on floating offshore wind energy deployment. Then the next thing is that there was a short-lived policy momentum. So temporary political support for offshore wind emerged following the war in Ukraine. And this happened during a parliamentary roundtable in March 2021, when the Bulgarian policymakers from different political parties were united, and they urged the experts to come and prepare offshore wind legislation. Then maybe another thing which is important, a few reforms that were included in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, namely wind acceleration areas and offshore wind legislation, as new big reforms were included in this political document as a commitment of the Bulgarian country. But then we experience a lot of political instability. Bulgaria changed for within 3 years 7 governments in total, and also conflicting elite interests and also media disinformation, particularly in the northeast region, which created additionally a lot of resistance to wind energy industry, both onshore and offshore. So the local community remained pretty passive in this process. However, there was really a lot of negative campaigning against wind energy. So against this background, we had to organize our co-creation activities and to involve the local community in this honest conversation about effective and just governance of the wind energy. Just a few highlights about this situation. You see that we had strategic priorities only on paper, no political leadership. Also, despite of that political instability, offshore wind both faced the infrastructure competition. Environmental and visual impact was seen as a big reason for opposition. And then in general, some resistance to reform, and lack of inclusive practices because of the urge to implement these reforms in a very short time because of the big EU political frames as part of the National Recovery Resilience Plan implementation. Then next slide, please. In light of all this, our ambition was to promote offshore wind deployment in the inclusive, also synergetic and people-centered way by highlighting on one side all these commitment to the EU agenda, but also the alignment with national specifics, regional needs, and also the potential added value for the local community. Then another thing, maybe during the entire process, the internal discussion in our team about actually what is just in this process was really very dominant. How justice is actually understood in practice, in reality, when we have to balance national ambitions and national interests among the regional understanding of what should be done and how the region should be developed, but also whose interests are legitimate in the wind energy discussions, and also considering the interests and justice for the future generation. So our approach was, in any case, co-designing models for visual, but also social economic integration. We try to integrate a lot of tools in order to have more evidence-based discussion. Then also try to explore synergies with traditional industries and traditional stakeholders. Then to stay thematically flexible because of the really very urgent, very dynamically changing political agenda and communication. So we draw upon hot topics in the public agenda, and so we define the topics of our wind lamps. And of course, we had to cope with a lot of disinformation, misinformation by involving experienced experts, data analysis, and evidence in this exercise. We had in total 4 wind labs, and now we are planning the 5th edition. So here you can see the topics, but we started with the reform about inclusive defining of approaches for spatial planning of RES accelerated areas or wind accelerated areas. Then we had one edition specifically focused on visual effects of the offshore wind in the northeastern region. Then we had one about how to actually maximize the value for the local community in the planning of offshore wind renewable project. And then the last one was about multi-use, especially we included both onshore and agriculture, but also drawing upon these synergies. We had also dedicated expert talking about aquacultural co-location with offshore wind and how this could be implemented for Bulgaria. The next slide, please. We experienced several challenges, so also we call them friction points. Across all editions of the Wind Lab 1, the core challenge was actually this disconnect between actors, but also between sectors, different industrial sectors, and between scales, particularly between EU ambition, national policy, business strategies, the perspective of the local communities. The planning processes, both for onshore and offshore, were very fragmented. So the sectoral integration, all these conversation about how we actually can combine traditional industries or traditional or the power and interest of the traditional actors in a specific region with the incoming investor was very weak. And then the communication channels between the key stakeholders were insufficient or missing altogether. But we also experienced different other challenges like this regulatory uncertainty. Meanwhile, a new legislation for offshore wind was proposed and voted in the parliament. Then after this moment, it was frozen. This created a lot of additional noise in our debate and discussions. Then business strategies, there were several companies expressing interest in floating technologies. Then these companies decided to exit the market because of the political uncertainty, a lot of mistrust among the local community, and also very weak mechanism for social justice and inclusion on institutional level at all. Then we actually formulated here on my slide, these are my 2 last slides, actionable recommendations first for the local and national stakeholders, how to proceed in this conversation further. First of all, we believe that there should be some legislative provision adapted that will enact legal mandates for participatory spatial planning so that the stakeholders participate and really a wider circle of stakeholders participate from the very, very beginning, from the planning processes. Then developing a national offshore GIS platform, which is actually publicly accessible, and there is agreement about what are the sources for the data. Then also institutionalizing visual impact standards and integrating such type of regulation, because it seems that this is a problem in terms of aesthetics and security for the local community, for the touristic sector, etc. Then also develop the regulatory framework in a way that embed the local economic benefit mechanism, including community ownership models, municipal revenue contribution, and benefit sharing funds. Promoting dual use for wind and other sectors or other use of areas at sea, strengthening the institutional capacity and coordination mechanism, and also establishing a permanent multi-stakeholder platform. Such a platform was actually developed meanwhile, and this is the Black Sea Renewable Energy Coalition, but it's still not recognized by institutional actors. Then the last slide contains more actionable recommendation for other regions. Here we believe for other emerging markets for offshore wind, it's very important to have structured and inclusive engagement formats from the very beginning, to recognize not only technical expertise, but also non-technical knowledge to be included here. Including social part, cultural, etc. Local preferences, maybe also already developed capabilities in the region. And here the justice as design principle, and not only as an add-on. It is also very difficult, I believe, even for the one who is involved, as our role was in the process, to really find a balance between all the dimensions of justice, and to consider all these interests of different stakeholders. Very often, some of these stakeholders are just not so loud, therefore they are not included into the process. I believe this is from my side, and I will stay here for your questions. I believe a lot of our findings will be also further explained by the other, and they were prominent in the other wind labs as well. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much, Maria. We will move on to our second wind lab that takes place in Portugal, and I will give the floor to Philippe.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you.
You're muted, Philippe.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Maria. Felipe Alves here from the Center for Ecology, Evolution and Environmental Changes based at the University of Lisbon. I've been leading Wind Lab 2, which has a focus on the economic participation of citizens, local stakeholders in the wind energy transition, and particularly in the repowering investments that need to happen in Portugal in the next upcoming years. Now, this topic, of course, has a very good purpose, and that's basically because in Portugal, so far until now, there is, at least in the wind energy sector, there is no case of an energy community, an energy cooperative, or any kind of crowdfunding, crowd lending. So there's no economic participation really of citizens or local stakeholders in wind energy. So our challenge, of course, is to bring that change to Portugal. So we had this big dream vision to really foster, promote, bring about the first community-financed, community-owned wind project in Portugal. So how did we address this big challenge? We did it by bringing a number of events, workshops, what we call the co-production events, through a participatory action research process, where we actually did it on a triple strategy. So we worked with policymakers and decision makers from a top-down more perspective on policy change. We worked with promoters, private companies, but also municipalities and regional agencies to see what could be done using existing laws, existing financial and economic incentives, etc., like to bring the change from the squeezing perspective. But also we try to work with bottom-up initiatives, decentralized movements, and a number of different actors to see what we could empower from a bottom-up perspective to bring about this this change in our things. So far, what we are able to do in the past year, also based on all this participatory action research process, was Amanda, please change. It was that we already produced a number of outputs, particularly these two that I bring you here. One is a manual for municipalities to be able to use existing mechanisms either in the law or within their economic fiscal instruments that they can have at their disposal to bring a more fair and just energy transition, particularly for wind energy. And the other one is a policy brief based on the workshops that we had with policymakers on what are the ideal policy mix, policy instruments that we can use in Portugal within our regulatory framework to really bring a more just transition. So these are some of the outputs. And I'm just bringing you a few highlights or a few insights that we got so far from our process. One of them, which I guess it's a standard one, it's that really policy is unavoidable. So a policy change is unavoidable. We were speaking with promoters, with private companies, and they were basically saying is, unless the law changes, we're not going to move an inch. We were actually speaking with bottom-up initiatives, and they were saying the same, like we need more structural systemic change. The law needs to change, the incentives, fiscal incentives, etc. needs to change. Even the conditions for the auctions, energy auctions, need to change if we really want to bring a more just and effective wind energy transition. So this it really became one of these key points. It's like, it's not that policy is important. This policy change is unavoidable. And in this case, we've been mostly looking into some of the policy changes in Catalonia, namely regarding the law in terms of the crowd lending and crowd that enables citizens to participate, and it makes it mandatory. So we've been using a lot of the European examples on this law and regulatory frameworks to inspire policymakers in Portugal. The second insight that we got from our work in Portugal was that there's really a critical role, I would say pivotal role here, with working with municipalities and regional energy agencies. We try, so as you know, like policy change at the national level is a quite complicated, bureaucratic, political issue. However, we did a lot of municipality workshops, and we realized that actually municipalities are very willing to step into this terrain and to bring change in a much faster way, but also because, of course, this change is happening in their own territory, so they're closely connected with the stakeholders. And I think they do have quite a lot of instruments at their disposal. That's why I also did a manual for municipalities, because we do believe that municipalities and regional agencies play a really big critical role. So we actually decided to start focusing more and more of our energies working with them, and also working what are the existing instruments they have to promote more justice at the local and regional level. So these are some of the two key insights. We also have a third insight that became very apparent, at least for Portugal. This is a big reality, which is for many of these communities where we're trying to bring these new concepts, terms, etc., we realized that it was really hard to bring a true economic, meaningful participation of citizens when there is a very low level of energy literacy, even financial literacy, but also a very quiet public, I would say, in terms of the energy democracy. So at least the reality in Portugal, very different from the north of Europe. There's really weak energy democracy, energy literacy also very low, financial literacy also very low. So we realized that whatever we were bringing had to be more just making those instruments available. We also had to build this type of literacy and make investments in capacity building, on empowering citizens at the local level, and building really this kind of capacity at the local level. So that was a very clear insight that we got from our process, and we started investing more of our resources in, again, promoting this basic energy democracy, energy literacy, financial literacy as the ground for then the economic participation of citizens in the wind energy. And finally, last insight that I'd like to share with you here is that we realized that we have to go beyond what is perhaps what could make sense sometimes, but then we have to go a bit further. So we realize that it's more than just allowing for crowdfunding, for example, or crowd lending opportunities, or for just establishing energy communities, particularly because just establishing a wind energy community is not necessarily per se a guarantee of inclusivity and distributive justice or procedural justice, because we've seen examples of basically energy cooperatives that sometimes even mimic some of the inequalities, some of the imbalances that we see in other structures. So we saw, for example, that some of the most willing people to actually participate in crowd lending investments, for example, are already kind of middle class or upper classes, etc. And we will see that the energy poor, for example, or the lower classes, or even women, or etc., they were not being able to participate, even if the instrument was there. So one of the insights that we've been having is that we have to go deeper. We have to go deeper into governance structures, into making sure that even if the instruments are there, for example, crowd lending, that we make sure that the instrument is really inclusive, it gets to everybody, and the benefits of whatever is happening also benefit the wider public, particularly those more in need, and particularly those of in energy poverty situations, etc. So really kind of digging deeper into what justice means and going beyond just the first stage or the second stage, and making sure that these instruments are really inclusive. So these are some of the insights that we got. I thought I was having 10 minutes, so it was exactly 10 minutes.
It was exactly 10
yeah, that's it.
minutes.
I'm looking forward for the conversations later on. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. And also for keeping your time. That's great. Ensures that we have enough discussion. So excellent. Perfect. So then we are moving right along to our third wind lab. And this is from Airborne Wind Europe on airborne wind energy. And I'll let Kristen take the floor.
Yeah, hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Christian Petrick. I'm Secretary General of Airborne Wind Europe. And Airborne Wind Europe is the association of the airborne wind energy sector. And many of you may wonder what that is, so I have to explain a little bit what the technology is all about. So we produce electricity with kites instead of wind turbines. The companies that we are working with are developing systems that use that use kites to capture the wind at high altitudes up to 600-700 meters with very low material input. So you see here these soft kites or rigid wing kites that are a little bit more like drones or small airplanes that really use very little, up to 90% less material than wind turbines to reach these high altitude winds. To briefly show you how this works, we have a small animation. Most of the concepts use this ground gen system where the generator is on the ground. The kite flies out in figures of 8 or circles, and with that pulls a tether from a drum that turns, and then you have a generator next to it to produce electricity. At one point in time, the tether is reeled out, so you have to pull in the kite again, reel up the tether, and then the cycle starts again. So that's the yo-yo concept type of system. So this kind of technology is pretty new, and that's already one of the challenges that we faced. If you go to the next slide. No, sorry, it comes afterwards. I just want to show where it is, our wind lab is located. Sorry, one back, sorry. It's around Berlin. So there's the region of Brandenburg, where one of our members, Enerkite, has a production facility in Eberswalde. And then they were looking at a site in Ketzin, or are looking or developing a site in Ketzin, which is just west of Berlin. In that area, if you go to the next slide. In that area, we have the challenge that there are already a lot of wind turbines on the so-called Nauener Platte. More than 200 wind turbines have been installed already starting in the 90s. So many people in that area know well wind, but they are also, a lot of them are not so fond of really seeing these wind turbines all the time. So it's a tricky environment where people have also not in the past been really involved in these wind developments, and they're not really benefiting from them. So that is one of the big challenge. And the other one is, what I started to say, that we are coming with a new technology that a lot of people don't know. So in 2024, a survey was carried out by the energy agency in Germany. You can see here they were asking, have you heard already about airborne wind energy? And just this green share here, some 25% were saying, okay, yeah, we have heard about it, but a lot of them not even in detail. The yellow ones, so more than a third, were saying, okay, we don't even know it, or we don't know it, but we may want to hear more about it. And a lot were saying, oh, it doesn't even interest us. So we have to raise awareness on this technology and also explain what it actually means. So this literacy that was mentioned by Philippe before goes beyond just energy. It also goes towards technologies. So on the next slide, I explain briefly the ambition and the approach. So we want to apply and identify the best practices for stakeholder participation from the conventional wind sector, because there's a lot known already, and our project here helps with that as well. But we don't want to start from scratch, but already really use what has been dealt with before and what has been recommended. So what we have done is a detailed stakeholder mapping, including not only local citizens, but also authorities wider spread in Brandenburg and other organizations like bird experts and other environmental groups. And we wanted to involve them as early as possible in different setups, online meetings, events, workshops, and so on. So on the next slides, you will see that we had scoping interviews already in 2023. Then we conducted 2 online workshops, one as a general one for all stakeholder groups, and the second one focusing on environmental impacts. The important thing here is that at that time, we still couldn't communicate that the site would be in Katzin. We also only could say this in Brandenburg, because the project developer, Enerkite, said we don't want to involve the community too early if there are, for example, if we don't get the field, the field owner, if they don't give us the permission to fly there, or if there are other general problems with that site from the environmental aspect, for example, then it would also be not good to already involve the community. And that was one of the things where we weren't sure, is that really, are we coming too late now? But actually in the last workshop just happening last week, they confirmed that we did the right approach, so that the local community was only engaged really in September last year, when it was clear that the general permits could be obtained. They were not all already obtained, but they could be obtained. So at that time, this event here where you see the photos what carried out, where over 50 people from the local municipality came and was that the project was explained on different flip charts, and some drinks were given out and so on. So it was a kind of very good event to really tell the people what will be coming. So far, the system still hasn't been deployed. It will only be towards fall. So we are, as you can see, we have done all these work now, all these interactions without having the real system deployed at that site yet. So that shows also, if you go to the next slide, one of the recommendations. Treat community engagement like permitting or engineering. It's a core project discipline, so you really have to budget and staff for that. It's really important to already involve potentially consultants that know how to deal with these stakeholder engagements. And it's not something that you would do at the end, but you have to really start very early on to engage the community. And for our companies that are all young startups, this is actually a real challenge, because you need money for that and a lot of time to go into detail and to look for who are actually the key persons that you have to deal with at every site that you want to develop. Then this early engagement, as I said, it sounds always easy, do it early, but it's actually then when you go into it a little bit tricky that you find the right moment, so that it's not too early, where people then, or where something can happen and the project won't happen at all because you haven't looked at something like you haven't talked to a certain authority or to the landowner. but also not too late, so that still the people in the community can see it, that they can actually participate and to some extent also influence the project. Then ensure transparency throughout the project. We saw this now also at this last workshop. It's really important to give honest information that certain things we do not know. For example, the specific system of NRKite, how will it deal with birds, or how will birds deal with that system? At what height will it be flown best to have lowest impact? So there needs to be a bird monitoring. So these kind of things have to be communicated very well, so that people that are concerned on these issues, and we have people from the environmental group there, are kind of satisfied, and they can see that there are efforts being done to minimize impacts. And then last slide. Adapting to the local context is important. As I said, here in this case, we had to deal with people that are not so fond of conventional wind energy, but we see there may be an advantage that they say, okay, airborne wind may be a new thing that is potentially nicer to see, but there's some benefits. But yeah, local benefits as such is kind of difficult. Because we, at this stage, at least for this project, we have only it's a research project for 3 years, so it's not really possible to already engage financially in this project. And then, yeah, ongoing communication, really keeping the community up to date, and already starting now, planning for the next workshop or event. That's also very important to keep a good communication. Yeah, and with that, I think I'm also just below 10 minutes, and thanks for listening, and happy to answer the questions that may come up later.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think that we have a lot of really useful insights specific to your wind lab, but also we can already kind of see some overarching, which is really great. And also thank you for keeping time. Excellent. So we will move right along to our fourth wind lab, and this is on maritime sustainable planning in the North Sea. And I'll give the floor to Anna.
Yes.
Sorry, I keep.
Okay, can you hear me now? Great. So yes, hi everyone. So we're with this wind lab, we're moving to offshore environment, and we're moving more to the north. So this wind lab was, as Amanda already said, about maritime sustainable planning in the North Sea. And we wanted to zoom in to understand what is the current state of justice and effectiveness in the offshore wind environment development there. So why did we decide to do this? So North Sea is quite busy sea. So there are already some traditional activities taking place, such as shipping, military, tourism, fishing, aquaculture, oil and gas, the list goes on. But then we have to think about that there is also this climate mitigation and adaptation that is being pushed and is super, super urgent to be done. And one of the ways that the countries of the North Sea are considering how to address this need is by large-scale offshore wind and grid deployment. So this is let's say, like a newcomer in the seas. On the other side, there are more and more reports and facts showing that the seas and the North Sea is in a quite dire condition. For instance, the OSPAR quality report is highlighting some of the really important information that the seabirds, benthic habitats, marine mammals are really in a poor condition. Therefore, we really need nature protection and restoration, which also takes space. So all of these activities are taking place in the North Sea. Amanda, can you just go back to the, thank you. No problem. And luckily, there are some tools that are taking place already in the North Sea, but also in the EU and globally, which is the Maritime Sustainable Planning. And Maritime Sustainable Planning is trying to allocate enough space to all of the activities at the sea. But planning happens at different levels as well. It's not only on the maritime spatial planning, but it's also on the project planning level. And with this wind lab, we wanted to create a new term called maritime sustainable planning that looks into these two levels at the same time. So the point of our wind lab was to see how is the maritime sustainable planning helping offshore wind development to become more just and effective. So now we can go to the next slide. So first, what we decided to do is to analyze what are the threats and opportunities with this offshore wind and grid deployment. And we roughly categorize them into 4 categories, such as environmental, socioeconomic, spatial and technical implications, and governance implications. So when it comes to the environmental implications, I already mentioned the poor health of biodiversity in the North Sea, but also even though we need offshore wind and grid infrastructure, this also poses another threat to the biodiversity. However, it's not only bleak, there are also opportunities to understand how to develop this infrastructure and what are the tools. Similar to the socioeconomic implications, so offshore wind doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are other sectors that I already mentioned, and there's obviously conflicts with other sectors, but also local opposition. When it comes to spatial and technical implications, we were concerned about the uncoordinated offshore wind and grid planning. Sometimes discussions on energy transition miss this very, very important puzzle piece of grid. And it's not only when we're talking about this with the NGOs or with local communities, but the grid is, if you don't have the grid, you don't have the energy transition, basically. Then it's also about modeling. How do you model? How do you take all of these different considerations in a way that this data exists and then can be modeled? And on governance, who is deciding where these activities are taking place? Who has the benefits and who is getting the short end of the sticks of this transition? So it's quite a complex topic, but we decided to use this opportunity of the Wind Lab to address this in a comprehensive way. So how do we do this? So we had 7 co-production activities from September 2023 all the way to April 2025, some of which you can see in the pictures. And since the topic is quite complex, we had to also include a diverse group of participants. So it went all the way from high-level EU and national decision makers, representatives from the industry, as in offshore wind and grid industries, environmental and climate NGOs, but also academia. And we tested a bit different formats. So we also had in-person and online co-production activities. And we tried out with panel discussions, with more participatory world cafes, dot voting, futuring. And what came as a very interesting conclusion during these co-production activities is that smaller expert-driven sessions worked better than large panel discussions. This allowed us to actually extract more in-depth conversations and information that can be used for our recommendations. What also came as very important is that these co-production activities were great opportunities to go beyond silos approach. So to have representatives from different sectors or different disciplines together at the table was more impactful for us than having just a table with only tourism specialists, for instance. And something very, I think, useful for everybody organizing these kind of co-production activities is that there is strong preference for hands-on exercises. So we're all sitting at our desks looking at our screens, but we all miss a bit more interactive exercises. And it's not only the academia or local communities or NGOs that need this, it's also the high-level people in suits that actually also miss this kind of things and find it useful for the conversation. So this is on what formats we used and how we did this. What we heard during these co-production activities, as you can anticipate, it was quite diverse, but we were able to kind of categorize it. So as already mentioned at the start, energy transition doesn't happen in vacuum. So for this, when we look at the social level, so if you want to develop offshore wind and grids in a just and effective way, you have to do cross-sectoral and international cooperation. Then this is on more high level, but on the more local level, it's the local communities. So some people think that by going offshore, you are removing the opposition from local communities out of the picture. But this is not necessarily the case. And this is also not the case of simple NIMBYism. It's more about ownership and being part of the process and understanding the process and having a say in the process. So local communities, they need to be included in the process, but also they need to understand what are the potentials for benefits and the co-ownership. This is also important on the social side, but also on the natural side of things. So if all our economic activities depend on healthy ecosystems. So diminishing the importance of this it's not going to go well in the long term. What we also heard on stakeholder engagement. So stakeholder engagement is obligatory, depending obviously on the format, and the scale depends on from case to case and nation to nation, but during maritime spatial planning and during project planning. What we've heard from different participants is that, yes, stakeholder engagement is crucial, but what is even more crucial is proper timing, that the language during stakeholder engagement is clear to everyone participating, and that people participating have the power to influence the decision. So it's not about just sitting at the table being informed, but also having the right to say something about the project or the maritime spatial plan in the end. Planning and modeling is sometimes very in its own silo and are focused very on the data that they can actually get, and then they play with it and model. This unfortunately doesn't represent all the complexity of social and environmental reality. And what also becomes more complex is the marine ecosystems. So they are more complex, uncharted. So just simply replicating the onshore reality to offshore will not work. And this is what we also heard during the modeling part of the co-production activities. Interestingly, from different stakeholders, there was this point that Maritime Spatial Plan currently seen as this governance tool, and it's more like an administrative tool. But what if we would use Maritime Spatial Planning in a more transformative way? And this is becoming more and more apparent when you're starting to put activities in the map and looking at the targets, and it just doesn't work. So there is this need, and there is this invite to think about how this tool can be used in a more structural change. I'm sure we are all aware of the conversations about acceleration of renewables, not only offshore renewables, and how to get there. And we've heard from not only environmental communities, but also from TSOs and offshore wind developers that it's not about removing environmental aspects of permitting and not doing stakeholder engagement. There are other ways how you can do this. And what became what was a nice moment during our co-production activities is that the people that usually don't sit at the same table realize that they might have common goals, and that this could be actually used to cooperate to increase their advocacy potential. What I mean by this is that, for instance, smaller NGOs are not necessarily all of them are working on cooperatives and ownership and energy communities, or vice versa. But they realize if they work together, that they can increase their advocacy potential, especially when lobbying against the big players who are trying to diminish in general energy transition. In the next slide, which I think is also my last slide, which is, what are the principles that we got out of all of these co-production activities? So we understand principles as recommendations for, be it policymakers, offshore wind developers, other relevant stakeholders like NGOs or local communities. So think about this when I say principles. So as I said, it's not only environmental impact, it's the social part of the puzzle. And when you're doing your maritime spatial plan or your project, offshore wind or grid project, it was advised to do a detailed socioeconomic assessment. And in this way, you can really assess what is the impact on tourism, what is the impact on fishing, what is the impact on shipping, and address it very, very early on. As already said, stakeholder engagement, yes, but participatory, inclusive, and timely. Maritime spatial planning can be used as a platform to address broader societal transformations. Permitting should be standardized, and one-stop shops, such as those in Denmark, for instance, should be established. And this could be a way to accelerate permitting rather than just remove all the environmental and social aspects of planning. As already mentioned, nature is in a very dire condition, and therefore we need proactive nature protection and restoration measures. And this can be done in a way not only by supporting this from the government and allocating space in the Maritime Spatial Plan, but also supporting developers such as offshore wind and grid developers to do the same. Community ownership, it's really hard in the offshore environment because such a big project, and it's the boundary of entering in this kind of a project is very, very, very high. However, there are good examples, and we're already looking into the Belgian and Dutch consortia where they have community ownership in there. And what became apparent is that the political support for this is the first crucial step. Multi-use is something that is sometimes touted as a silver bullet for spatial conflicts and spatial squeezing, but unfortunately it's not so easy, so they should be piloted very carefully. And as already said, the modeling has to take into account all of the complexity, and if we want to do all of this properly, what is obvious is that not only natural boundaries, like the ecosystem boundaries, are not the same as nation-state boundaries. It's also obvious that countries have to collaborate with each other. So for this, the transboundary, sea basin-wide, and a cross-sectoral approach is needed to go beyond just environmental protection, for instance, or just conflict management. All of this will be summarized in the energy read that we will publish later. But in any case, if you have any other questions, let me know.
Great, thanks so much. And finally, I know we're a little short on time, but I have a feeling that Tim will be really effective in his explanation of the wind energy compass. So with that, I'll give you the floor.
Yes, thanks, Amanda. My name is Teun Strikkers. I'm researcher and advisor at Drift Research Institute in the Netherlands. We're working on transitions, and I am lead on Wind Lab 5, basically creating a wind energy compass for decision making. So, what is the compass? The compass is a workshop tool we developed to improve shared understanding and perspective of justice and effectiveness, navigate synergies and bottlenecks for justice and effectiveness, goal setting, identifying barriers, and exploring strategies to overcome these barriers. So, and why did we actually do this? Well, we tested this compass out in various settings. So we did this in Portugal, in Slovenia, in Spain, and in the Netherlands. And the goal of this was, for the compass, was to aid. Previous slide, please. The compass was, the aim was really to help regional decision makers in their approach to navigate these intricacies between effectiveness and justice. Next slide, please. Yes. And so why did we work on this workshop? Why did we get there? Is that because wind energy development is obviously a complex process involving multiple actors, and a common understanding of justice and effectiveness is often missing. Is that what we found even with stakeholders? So we kind of found out that it's very important to have a shared conversation, shared understanding. So to have a co-creation type format in order to create a solid basis, but then also have a goal connected to this. So how wind energy development look like in 2030. And what we found out from our co-creation activities is that the workshop format works well as it combines expert opinion and in a structured format to improve understanding and increases actionable outcomes. So for who? The compass was mainly designed for regional decision makers, meaning experts in the field of wind energy development, focusing on the government actors. And that can be municipal actors, provincial, national level. Additionally, it could be also working for companies, but there the caveat is really it's important to do this workshop, this compass, to do this with as many different stakeholders as possible to have quite different breakout groups. And hopefully you're a little bit interested in actually how it looks. So I will walk you through in very briefly how the method, how we designed the method. And in the end is also my name, so you can just send me an email if you're more interested, then we can plan in the call. So the idea is that it's very important to set a central question. Like I mentioned before, how might wind energy development look like in the North Sea basin by 2040? Next slide, please. And another one is, how does wind energy look like in Slovenia by 2040? So these are very general abstract questions, but they are also connecting the present to the future. But in our conversation, we understood, like I mentioned before, is that from stakeholders that justice and effectiveness are embedded in their thinking, but not necessarily very aligned or very understood. It's more of an intuitive feeling. So it was very important to break down these concepts of justice and effectiveness in several indicators, of which in the next slide you'll see one of them, which is effectiveness. So you can see here a question: to which extent is wind energy development geographically close to demand? And then we have basically a rating system from very far to very close, and we do this tailor-made for every different workshop. So for every context, this is tailor-made, and we found it to be very important, as the context between the different nation states and different spatial resolutions means that different questions have to be asked. So next slide. We asked the participants with these indicators to rate their present state. So like they work in different breakout groups, usually 5 to 7 people, 7 experts, and then they have discussions about these topics, and then they also afterwards go into the future. So yeah, what does it really mean? You can see it here. And for the North Sea, is that, for example, different breakout groups, here in this case there were 2, there are some similarities, luckily, but there are also discrepancies, also indicating that even between groups, there's a difference in how people understand the energy transition or the wind energy development. And then we asked them, okay, now you have formulated where you are now, where would you like to be in the future? Where would you like to be in 2030? So with this ambition, you set a goal. And but how to get to this goal is there are different barriers. As you also heard today during the different wind labs, is there are many different barriers, but it's also important to prioritize to see, okay, where do we need to focus? Because you cannot do everything at once. So we do a kind of a dot voting, and then we get from these barriers strategies. And then in the compass, we also developed a strategy Lotus, which is a in paper but also digital tool for stakeholders to think about what are the possibility, the range of strategies that they could use to overcome these barriers. Yes, they're a bit abstract, but because it's in paper format, you cannot do everything. So if you can see, they can fold it out during the workshop, then you see a little bit more information. So looking at local impact, risk and opportunities, you want to actually avoid environmental harm. Okay, then you fold out the Lotus more. In the bottom screen, then you can see, for example, lower density of wind farms to reduce collision, animal detection systems. So we try to give, this is kind of the end of this workshop format. So by the end, they have formulated a better understanding. And we also asked this to the participants, and they concur with this. Better understanding, they prioritize the barriers, they set goals, and they can identify some strategies to overcome these. Next slide. So what do you need if you want to do this yourself? An expert facilitator per group, so per breakout group, a local regional expert on wind energy to set a central question and indicators. Quite some time, because there are very fruitful discussions, anywhere between 4 to 8 hours, depending on the amount of indicators you're choosing. And some highlights, for example, from the North Sea that we did with Wind Lab 4 is financial incentives are necessary to maintain or grow wind energy development. Procedural justice is advanced in the North Sea, while both effectiveness and distributive justice could be improved upon. And the combination of procedural justice and effectiveness is necessary to further accelerate, showing that there's definitely a synergy and an overlap between these cases. Next slide, please. Some reflections. The compass is an effective tool in improving knowledge and supplying strategies. It helps in aiding the understanding of handling synergies and trade-offs, and the compass works well in various contexts. So these I'm not saying myself, these were actually found by the participants and in the workshops in the in-depth dialogue sessions. And I think also a question was in the chat regarding this. Yes, so we only tested it in different locations. We couldn't do quite a follow-up. So that would be my recommendation, to use this method on a more consequent basis. Yeah, to go to the next slide. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I hope that that was clear and gave the participants some really good food for thought. And also, as always, thank you for doing that so quickly. So I see the time. I will try to still ensure that we have a fruitful discussion round. However, we have invited our very special guests, Fanny and Francesc. Fanny's from ICLEI, which I guess many of you might know is the local governments for sustainability in Europe. They have some principles that they also have developed, and I will not take any more time to explain this. I will give her the floor and say, first of all, kind of what are some reflections from what we heard today, and then how it may be part of your or related to your initiatives.
Thank you, Amanda. Hello, everyone. I'll just share my screen because I prepared a few slides to make the principles a bit more clear. So I think you can all see my screen. So what I wanted to briefly present today on is the European Consensus on Fast and Fair Renewable Grids and how it links with the wind labs. I'll just very briefly present the consensus so it's clear what we've been working on and how it links with the wind labs, the 5 principles that came out of this consensus, and then the next steps for us and the learnings that we will input in our work from the wind labs. So the consensus, it is the first cross-sector consensus on fairness in renewable energy. And what that means concretely is that, all of these actors that you can see on the screen all work together during 6 months to come up with a consensus of principles for a fair renewable energy transition. So you see you have a very big variety of actors. So you have us, but then also Wind, Wind Europe, Solar Power Europe, the European Environmental Bureau, and we all work together to find this consensus, this set of principles that I will detail in a minute. And these principles, like we thought, were quite useful because of the same conclusions we came to as the wind labs, of this many interests you have on the local level and the need to make a difference locally. So you have often mayors, elected officials working in this context where you have many different interests, developers and investors with profit imperatives, landowners, cooperatives, environmental organizations, and this massive stake of managing to bring all of this interest together and accelerate the renewable energy transition. I put here a quote from one of the mayors we've been working with, who said that one of the key goals for them was not to create conflict in the renewable energy projects that would then lead to further tension and conflicts on other projects locally. So it was one of the key goals we worked with. And so the several principles or drivers that we worked with that tie in with the wind labs are this idea of local empowerment and participation. So we really want to support local government and communities in leading projects. And we did that by organizing workshops and interviews to understand how the principles could support them and what were their key priorities in France, Spain, Italy, Germany, and Poland. Then this notion of fairness that we share of ensuring that, yes, the energy transition is speedy, but it's also inclusive and it takes into account the perceived fairness of actors. So how they perceive processes as being fair or unfair, and then how they will act in accordance, and how we need to take this into account to make sure we receive acceptance on local projects. And then this idea of practical experimentation. So we don't want to just build principles and then share them. We want to make sure we identify good practices, opportunities, challenges, and we provide answers to them. So one thing think if you have good practices, we encourage you to go to our website and add your good practices in there, or look at our good practices to give inspiration on some projects. The 5 principles that came out of the articles, I think they reflect a lot of the reflections that's been happening in the wind lab. So for local projects, you need local influence. You need to involve residents, local actors in what's happening locally. You need local value, may it be local employment, benefits being used in the territory, supporting local initiative, transparency in how the revenue generated are used. So once the project can lead to economic benefits, what's happening with this money, where is it going? This should be transparent to all actors involved. Nature positive, at the minimum, you should try to mitigate the negative impact it can have on nature. And if possible, you can also try to deliver positive benefits, and then empowering community-led initiatives across Europe. They are a citizen-led initiative. How can we support them with expertise, financing, so they can build their own projects? So the next steps for us at Fast and Fair will be to make these principles more tangible on the national level. So we will be working with the 5 countries to translate this European consensus in each of the countries. And one thing we will do when looking at the wind labs is drawing on the lessons learned when we try to apply the principles nationally. So try and improve our understanding of local challenges and opportunities, and then also try to provide adequate capacity building for local actors. So get inspirations from the participatory guidelines, one of the key challenges they face. The compass can be very useful for decision making, and also other forms of participatory governance structures, potentially socioeconomic assessments. So these are the next steps for us. If you want more information, these are contact information we can share after, but Arthur would be the main contact point. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you so much. Really informative and also so super fast. Thank you so much. We'll actually have some time for discussion, so I appreciate that. And then finally, I would like to welcome Francesc from Eco Union. If you have slides, otherwise we can spotlight you and you can just say a few quick words about what you saw.
Sure, I'll go ahead. I don't have slides. Well, thanks for inviting me. It was very interesting to see all these experiences of wind labs. And well, I come from Eco Union. We're an organization. We work in different horizon projects. And recently, we worked together with CAN Europe and ICLEI in community engagement and fair benefit sharing project, which so to try to understand which could be the KPIs, indicators that really can draw the line between what's really engaging community and what is not, what's incorporating social point of view of the community and what's not in terms of fairness, also in these different acceptions of fairness that we were talking about, recognition, distribution, procedural, and etc. So what I've seen in the explanations of the wind labs, many of the issues really are similar to what we dealt in this project. By the way, Christian Patrick was also a participant in this project with us that explained the wind lab from Germany. So many of the insights that you got are really similar to those that we got in our project. And for instance, about the issue of policy being unavoidable. So it's really key. So we defined some KPIs 14 for promoters, but we saw that so there is no there are no requirements behind. So all these potential KPIs are basically on a voluntary basis. It's true that when you talk about maritime spatial planning, so there is a need for a stakeholder engagement, but that's not initially an obligation specifically for promoter, but for the planning in general. So one very important element is go more in depth in requiring promoters to engage the community, because at the end we're talking about issues that you mentioned too, the importance of context, understand well the context, the issue of having early implication with the subtleties that it may imply. For example, in the Germany case, we saw that too early may not be good, but early enough it's necessary. So too early may not be good because it may imply that still there's the possibility get the permitting. So that's important to take into account. Of course, the issue of transparency is key. We include different KPIs in the project, such as the existence of an online platform where you can communicate with the community, where they can ask questions. So to which extent those questions were responded or not, how many ideas were incorporated from the community in the project design. Many of the points are similar, as I said. Also the issue of energy literacy. So at the end, promoters, it's normal that they try to publicize their project in terms of community engagement, social acceptance, etc. But we need to go a bit deeper and have altogether more energy literacy to understand where we can really draw the line. No? For instance, many projects publicize that they engage the community and so on, but if they don't include any option to participate financially in the project, so it must be explained, and we have to know that project does not include that. No, so we need to advance in this idea of making the community indicators, community engagement indicators, more objective. No, like we have a ROI, a return on investment concept, no, which is very used economically and technically to implement projects. So we need to have more clear KPIs and indicators that we can use to say that a project is fair or is not fair. Also, of course, the importance of benefit sharing. I agree also with the idea that an energy community is not fair per se. So it's a big step forward. So the issue of one person, one vote, the control of the community, it's key and it's great, but it doesn't mind that they have really implied vulnerable groups. For instance, in fact, in the case studies that we saw many few examples of really involving vulnerable communities. In terms of engagement, we saw few examples, but in terms of benefit allocation, even less examples. So this is ideas to go forward. So it's not only the goal to have an energy community, one person, one vote, control of the whole project, which is great, of course, but also going forward and implying vulnerable communities. And well, I think I could leave it there. The 14 KPIs are available and include different aspects. For example, the existence of a mediator that mediates between the project developer and the community and so on. So I would leave it here to be fast and to give some time to participate. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. It sounds like, yeah, we have a lot of common points, but also, yeah, it's really useful for future collaboration within our organizations, but also to try to bridge some of the gaps that the local context are needing. So I'm glad to hear. And I'm also glad to hear your rooster in the background. It's very, very nature inclusive.
I was hoping he couldn't sing, but yes, it happened.
All good. Okay, so I do see that we have a question in the chat. So in the meantime, I will give an answer for that. But if those who maybe didn't have a specific question were still looking to get involved, and I guess for this one, also if our WinLabs wanted to also contribute to this, that could be their Q&A to an extent. Then I wanted to mention considering your locality either as a participant or as a speaker today, what kind of approaches or guidelines are most applicable to your region? And if you're not quite sure yet, you can also just share any of the other key takeaways that you are really looking to bring with you for your work. So as you can, I will in the meantime try to find my chat. The question was about monitoring our stakeholder impacts. So what this might not be the exact answer to your question because I can't pull it up right now, sorry. But I did want to mention that our project and our project website, JustWind4All.EU, we have many different aspects that aren't the Wind Labs, including we have a participatory database for sort of open questions there. And then also in the development in the next months, because our project is finishing at the end of October, we are creating a wind governance toolbox that is aimed to kind of bring many of our pieces of our project together in a public facing way that can actually be beneficial for different governance levels and even community members or developers is the goal. So just to say that this doesn't end today, but we want to keep developing this, and all of your insights today also really help us better understand kind of how that should look and how it's most impactful to bring that to the public. Right, so we have some answers here. So it looks like, yeah, nature protection for sure. And please feel free to come back to our projects in the meantime, and we'll give you more information. Quickly, for those of you who have stayed to the end, we, as I mentioned, are wrapping up our project, but our energy reads are indeed coming out slowly. So the Maritime Sustainable Planning one has been submitted, and we are looking forward to sharing it to the public as soon as we can. The practical guidelines and strategies that we mentioned today, all of the Wind Labs, we will be placing them on our website after this this webinar, so you can look in case you missed anything. And then, as I mentioned, our remaining energy reads, so the other 4 will be out in the next couple of months. So follow our channels for updates. And then our final event of our project is on October 15th in Brussels. So if you're interested in really learning how all of this comes together, you can join us. We would be really happy to have you. And from there, I'm just really happy that you were able to join, and sorry that there wasn't a Q&A. This always happens. We get a little excited to get a lot of speakers, and then it goes long. But the Slido polls are going to remain open. At the end of this, there will also be a survey, and you can have any follow-up questions. I can get you in contact with our Wind Labs. So since we went long, thank you again to our Wind Labs and to our speakers at ICLEI and Eco Union. It was a pleasure, and I hope that you learned a lot today, and more food for thought in the future. Stay updated with JustWind4All. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, man.